All right, everybody, how's it going? This is Musa with Social Dance Mastery. Thank you, everybody who showed up for this webinar, this live stream webinar. I'm so excited. The topic for today is the origins of On2. So if you're watching this, then you really want to know about On2. You want to get your skills up with On2 salsa dancing, and you're really taking the actions to do this. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for making it here. We have so much that I'm excited to share with you today. So let's just get started. I'm going to share some of my slides so you can see what's going on. And just so you know, this is a webinar series. So we're going to have 4 webinars. This is the first one. It's about the origins of On2. Next week, next Monday, we're going to have the essential music theory for On2 for all the people who are interested in learning about all the music theory concepts that are necessary for dancers to understand about On2. We're going to get into that, basically the language of musicians. Then the next week after that is we're going to talk about the Afro-Latin gait and really how to get the body mechanics and the movement within the structure of the body and the time steps before we get into the steps, how to move with sabor, how to feel the rhythm and to really get the contrary body motion. And the last one, we're going to get into the actual On2 time steps, which there are several On2 time steps that exist. So we're going to talk about all of the time steps so that you know about all of this foundational knowledge of On2. So if anybody's here that wants to participate, I have one question for you. I want to know, please type in the chat, what's one thing that you would really like to take away from this On2 Salsa webinar series? Just type it in the chat. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your ideas. I want to hear what you're excited about. I want to hear just from you. So just type one thing in the chat that you would really like to take away from this On2 webinar series. And while we're doing that, I want to show you my promise to you from this webinar series. My promise to you is that you will refine your On2 salsa skills. You will master it more quickly than you've ever imagined. You'll fine-tune your ear, your ability to distinguish the various subgenres of salsa, and you'll be able to connect deeply with the music. So this will give you immense confidence, and it will improve your foundation in musicality, in your timing, your rhythm, and your coordination. This will transform your social dance experience by really connecting to the essence of salsa, which is On2. So one more thing I want to see from everyone, please put in the chat one challenge that you face with salsa musicality. What's something that you wish you could overcome when it comes to musicality in salsa? Okay, and while we're doing that, I'm gonna share a little bit about me and why I'm qualified to be teaching about this On2 salsa. One thing is that I'm a dancer, I'm a musician, and I'm an educator, which is a great combination because I have sort of like the best of the 3 worlds. I'm able to really know about the social dance environment. I know how to craft the curriculum to really help people learn it, and I also understand the language of music, being a musician. So this is why I really am excited to share this with you. But I want to share with you my struggle that I went through with On2 Salsa. And it started in my first trip to Cuba. And when I first went to Cuba, I was confident in my time step. And what I was saying in my head was 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. And I was really confident with that 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. But when I went to Cuba in 2010, this is me right here in one of the máquinas, one of the taxis, those old cars. I went to Santiago de Cuba and I went to this social dance that was happening in Parque Céspedes. It's one of the main town centers in Santiago de Cuba. And I was excited. I was excited to dance. I had my 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. I went to dance and something was not connecting. Something wasn't right. I wasn't able to connect with any of the dancers there. I wasn't able to find a partner to vibe with, to dance with. And I was like, what is going on? And then I realized that I was bringing my 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, but all the other dancers there had something else going on in their head. One dancer had the sound of the conga drum, which was kukum ka, kukum ka, kukum ka, kukum ka. One dancer had that in their head. Another dancer had the sound of the bass drum in their head. Boom, 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 boom. Another dancer had the sound of the piano in their head. Another dancer had the sound of the clave in their head. And what I had in my head was 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. I realized that there was no instrument in the salsa ensemble that's actually marking that beat 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. So I realized that this was a major problem that I had to solve. This was and it stemmed from how I was being taught in the United States, because that's where I was being taught my salsa skills and my technique was in the United States. So I really took the time to figure out how to solve this problem. And what I came up with was this elemental movement model. And now I use this to train and coach dancers with musicality and other things, with social dancing, with performing, and with teaching Afro-Latin social dances. And it's really an integrative approach to getting into the world of Afro-Latin music, salsa, and all types of diasporic forms of music and dance. It really blends together the whole picture as opposed to taking one thing out and teaching it. So that's what I realized what happened with me, is that I was taught the steps first. And this is what the elemental model sort of solves, is that it brings up the issue that to really build a good foundation, we have to not start at the steps, but we start first with the culture, right? We get a cultural understanding, we get a cultural context, so we know the 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 movements behind the moves, so we know the meanings of the moves, where they came from. And then after that, then we get into the musicality, which then we start learning about the different instruments, the different rhythmic structures. We start to learn about the different forms of salsa, the different subgenres. And then the last thing is we learn the steps. And this is important to have this sequential order, because it actually makes it so once you get to the steps, you have all the sabor, you have all the knowledge, and your ear is tuned and you're ready to dance anything. Not only that, you're ready to dance with anyone. So this is why this approach is so powerful. So if for everybody who's joining, if you stay to the end, I do have an offer for you. We have an On2 Salsa Accelerator that we're starting July 1st. So stay till the end so you can take advantage of this opportunity. So right about now, we're going to get into the main part of this webinar for this week, which is about the origins of On2. This is, if you don't know about where On2 came from, you're in the right place. I've curated this knowledge so that you can really see like why we dance on two, not just about the steps, right? But knowing where on two came from, why is it a thing, and what's important about on two from a historical perspective. So let's get right into it. Thanks everybody for joining. All right, everybody. So I hope you enjoyed that brief introduction to the origins of On2. It really gives you a visual and auditory reference as to where On2 came from. But we're going to go deeper. We're going to really trace where On2 came from. We're going to go way back to the 16th century and to see the roots of On2. And how we're going to do that is we're going to use this On2 historical timeline right here that I've created for you. And this is a good reference guide that you can use. It has all the names of the different dances, types of music. It has the dates for you, so you can use this as a reference to see how On2 has evolved throughout time into the modern On2 that we have today. Now, to really trace the origins of On2, we're going to talk about three main eras. The first era is the colonial era. The second one is the classical era. And the third is the modern era. These are the three different eras of contratiempo forms of music and dance. So the first era that we're going to talk about is the colonial era. And these are all of the main contratiempo forms of music and dance in the colonial era that are important to really understanding the origins of On2. The zarabanda, the contradanza, and the tumba francesa. But before we get into that, I really have a quick quiz for you. Now, this quiz is talking about contratiempo. I'm saying contratiempo. I don't want to assume that everybody knows what that means. So, can anyone tell me what contratiempo means? Type your answers in the chat. I really want to hear what you think about contratiempo, what your idea is about contratiempo, so I can see where everyone is. So I'll give you a little time to think about that question. Tell me what contratiempo means. Okay, so contratiempo in the context of dance is when time steps are accenting the syncopated offbeats rather than the on beats. So what this means, how I can break this down is, let's just break down the word contratiempo. Contra meaning against, tiempo meaning time. So what do you have? Against time. So that's referring to being the accent in the between beats, or another way I can say it is not hitting the on beats, hitting the off beats. This is an example of syncopated music. Now, the main reason why we have this contratiempo is because of the fusion between European and African cultures. Contratiempo and syncopation is used very heavily in African music, in the drumming, in the different instruments, playing in between each other. So syncopation is very common in African forms of music and dance, but it wasn't so common in European forms of music and dance until the African and European cultures started to merge together because of the transatlantic slave trade that was happening at the time. One of the biggest colonial empires at that time was Spain. And one of the biggest groups of enslaved African people at that time being transported was people from the Congo. So, this is how we start to see the African influence of music and dance starting to be introduced into European society, specifically into Spain. And we have a zarabanda. Now, the zarabanda originally was a Congolese concept of the god of iron. Now, this was translated into Spain as one of Spain's main musical forms called the saraband. And we can see that this saraband was banned in Spain in 1583, specifically for this reason, because of its African musical aesthetic and also because of its the way that the rhythms made people move. It was considered too risque for the Spanish society at the time that they had to ban it. And this is what happens with the syncopated rhythms. It makes the body move against itself, and it creates a very interesting quality of movement because of the rhythm. Now, a lot of the European musical traditions weren't focused on rhythm, they were mostly focused on melody and harmony, right? A lot of the African musical tradition is focused heavily on rhythm. So when these two came together, this is how you get this fusion of cultures. Now, as time went on, the Saraban would be welcomed more and more into European society. A lot of different European composers would start to compose a lot of sarabans, and it became a very popular musical form. So, what we're going to do is we're going to listen to a saraban so you can really hear, get an example of what this sounds like. I want you to hear the quality, the rhythmic quality behind the harmonies and the melodies in this song. So you can really hear what I'm talking about when I say syncopation or when I say contratiempo. And we're going to listen to this saraband by Gaspar Sanz. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to move a little bit more forward in time into the late 1700s. And the reason why we're coming to the 1700s is because we have to talk about the next colonial contratiempo form of music and dance called the contradanza. And the contradanza really started in Haiti, in Haiti. But after the Haitian Revolution, the migration of enslaved Franco Haitian people and French people to Cuba, it really made the spotlight from Haiti, which was one of the wealthiest colonies in the Caribbean at the time because of sugar. It really passed off that spotlight to Cuba. Now, if you look at the map right here, you see that Haiti is very close to the eastern side of Cuba. And after the Haitian Revolution, after that exodus of people from Haiti, a lot of people went over to that eastern side of the island and reestablished themselves there. Places like Santiago de Cuba, places like Guantanamo. And this is where some of the first contradanzas were being formed. It's very formal in nature. It was the European court dance at the time. But if you can see, the people playing the music a lot of the times were either black or mulatto. They were either mixed or they were black, and they would play in the ensembles called orquestas típicas. Now you can see in this ensemble you have a lot of European types of brass instruments, maybe a violin, and you have some of these timpani drums, which have roots and which have Arabic roots and African roots. So you can see that the fusion of cultures is starting to happen more and more between the ensembles and between the European societies at that time. So these are some of the main rhythms that were starting to creep into European classical forms and Baroque forms of music. These rhythms are the tresillo, which sounds like this: da 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 da. This is a tresillo. Do 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 ka 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 ka. That's the sound of the tresillo rhythm. Then you have the habanera rhythm, which sounds like this: da 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 da. This is the habanera rhythm. The habanera rhythm would actually become the rhythm of tango in Argentina later on. Then we have the cinquillo rhythm, which sounds like this: da 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 da. These rhythms are have a lot of African aesthetic in them because they are repetitive, they are very syncopated. A lot of, if you look at these rhythms, they're not hitting the beats. Some notes are in between the beats, and this is why these rhythms are very syncopated. The cinquillo rhythm, that last rhythm, da 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 da, that rhythm would eventually become the clave rhythm that we know today in salsa. So you can see the evolution of this happening. So now we're going to listen to a contradanza so we can really hear what's going on. I want you to listen to the rhythmic nature of this contradanza. I want you to see if you can hear the rhythm behind the instruments of what's going on, so you can notice which one of these rhythms is being played. Is it the tresillo? Is it the habanera, or is it the cinquillo? Okay, perfect. So if you listen to that song, you can hear that the tresillo rhythm is very prominent. So now we're gonna move on to the next colonial contratiempo form, which is called the tumba francesa. And you can see we're moving further in time. The tumba francesa really gets established in 1886, and this is an important year because this is when the slave trade legally ended in Cuba. So it was more open, there was more liberation, there was more space to practice your traditions, your music, your culture. Things were opening a little bit more. And this is where you get the tumba francesa. The tumba francesa was sort of like the African version of the contradance, if you notice, because a lot of African instruments were incorporated into its practice. And one of those instruments is the kata. And we can see the kata right here. You see the kata, it's played with two sticks upon a hollowed out piece of wood, and it marks out a repetitive rhythm that plays over and over and creates a real sense of a pulse when it's danced to. It's very syncopated. So we're going to listen to the tumba francesa and we're going to see how this kata rhythm actually sounds just like the cinquillo rhythm, right? Ta ta ka ta ka ta ta ka ta ka. Listen for this cinquillo rhythm within this tumba francesa that we'll play right now.
Si mueta mugimu bamandeso la fronego, yo kendo, Maria lao, o kendo Maria lao, o kendo, yo kendo Maria lao, o kendo Maria lao, o kendo, yo kendo Maria lao, o kendo Maria lao, o kendo, yo kendo Maria lao, o kendo Maria lao, o kendo, yo kendo Maria lao, o kendo Maria lao, o kendo, yo kendo Maria lao, o kendo.
Okay, perfect. So now let's move into our next era. This next era that we're going to talk about is the classical era, the classical contratiempo forms of music and dance. This era is so important because this is where we actually get our contratiempo time steps that are actually, they start to really be on two, meaning we start to break on the second beat. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is the danzón. The danzón is actually the national dance of Cuba. And if you look at the orquesta now, the orquesta típica in the danzón, we have a lot of European instruments. We have the bass, we have the horns, we have the violins, we have the timpani drums, but there's also some African instruments that were incorporated into the orquesta típica during the danzón. One of them is the güiro, which is the gourd-like instrument that was incorporated into the danzón. If we really watch the danzón, we watch how people dance danzón, and we listen to the music, we can see that contratiempo step really starting to take place. So let's watch some danzón, and I want you to focus on the steps while you listen to the music and see if you can hear the cinquillo rhythm and see if you can see how the time steps match up with those rhythms in a contratiempo form. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to move into the 20th century with our next classical contratiempo form of music and dance, which is called son cubano. Son cubano is very interesting because we get the inclusion of some more African instruments. Now, these instruments are the clave, the two sticks. Remember, those are the same two sticks that we saw in the tumba francesa, hitting the kata, right? Also the bongo, which is a drum, which that's Africa, coming from Africa, and the maracas, which can said to be of either African or indigenous origin. So in the evolution of son, we also see the evolution of different Cuban ensembles that start to form, such as the septeto, the sexteto, the charanga, and the conjunto. These are different groups that include different structures of instruments that really create different sounds of and different styles of son. So let's watch the son and see how the son is danced. And if you look at the footwork, you can see that it's the same footwork from the danzón. It's just translated into the son. This is what you can really see the evolution happening here. From the danzón to the son, you get the same contratiempo time step. Okay, we're going to talk about our next era of salsa on2, which is the modern era. We're going to talk about the modern contratiempo forms of music and dance. And this includes Afro-Cuban jazz, New York mambo, and modern salsa. Now, this is a very interesting story because it's almost a reunion in a sense of diasporic cultures, because we have Afro-Cuban coming to New York, meeting with the Afro-American jazz and creating that fusion of Afro-Cuban jazz. Right here we see Mario Bauza, who is from Cuba, Chano Pozo, who is from Cuba, and Dizzy Gillespie, who is from the United States, but is pioneering jazz. When these people came together, they started to create that fusion, which what would be called Afro-Cuban jazz. Now, as this started to develop, we have the Palladium Ballroom and the Mambo craze. And in the Palladium Ballroom, this was in New York City, and it was considered the mecca of Mambo, where everyone came to dance this style called Mambo in the 50s. Now, this venue, the Palladium Ballroom, was the home of what was called the Big Three. And this is my next quiz. Who were the big three in the Palladium Mambo era in New York? I want you to type your answers in the chat. Who were the big three in the Palladium Mambo era in New York? I'll give you some time to type in the chat your answer. Okay, the big three were Tito Puente, Machito, and Tito Rodriguez. These were the big three. These were the big headliners in this era in the 1950s in the Palladium Ballroom in New York. Tito Puente, who has Puerto Rican descent, Machito, Cuban descent, Tito Rodriguez, Puerto Rican descent as well. The fusion of these cultures really made something happen in New York. It made a hybrid type of music that was very energetic and that all types of different cultures related to and they all loved. Now, so let's listen to some New York mambo so we can hear how this sounds. And I want you to listen to the elements that we've been hearing, the syncopated rhythms, the repetitive beats. Listen to all those different elements and see if you can hear how it evolved into the New York mambo. Okay, so now we're getting into our last contratiempo form, which is the birth of modern On2, the birth of the salsa as we know it today, On2 salsa, modern On2 salsa. Now you see right here, somebody who really contributed to this was Eddie Torres. And Eddie Torres really started teaching this on concept of On2 after the era of the Palladium. He was really trying to bridge the gap between people who weren't used to syncopated rhythms and trying to he really wanted to give them an anchor, and he realized if he gave them the anchor, an a tiempo anchor, meaning on one, and then they can break on two after that, that really help people get the concept of on two faster and helped it to integrate it into their body. So this is very important, what Eddie Torres did at this time. And this time step of the modern on two is what is taught today in festivals and studios when we talk about on two. So thank you everybody for participating. And we have just went through all the different eras of on two, from the colonial to the classical to the modern. We went through all the different contratiempo forms of music and dance that contributed to what we know as modern on to today. So hopefully this gives you a reference so you can see how on to has evolved throughout time. So you can see where on to comes from. And it gives you just a bigger representation, a bigger perspective of what it means to dance on two and the essence of on two. All right, everybody. So thank you for coming to this live. If there's any questions, I would love to answer any questions. Does any, I see we have some people here live in the chat. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat, or any comments or any takeaways that you got. If you learned something useful from this information, let me know in the chat. I really want to know if this is valuable to dancers, to social dancers. Next week we're gonna talk about music theory for dancers and really how to understand the on to music theory. So we also have our on to accelerator course. Thank you so much. Okay, see you at the next one. Yes, okay. We're going to have our On to Accelerator course that will start July 1st. If you're interested in participating in this, let me know in the chat, connect with me, and I can get you into that On to course. Oh my goodness, we have a comment here from Sarah. She says, "Thank you. It's very valuable. I think every dancer should learn that at some point." Thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks so much. Yes, it's so important to know the history behind the dances because it adds substance to your movement. It really adds some type of a fire because because the movement is coming from somewhere, as opposed to just learning the steps. When you know the heritage, the culture, the history, you feel it when you move, and it creates a presence in your movement, which is why I love to teach this stuff, and I love to actually inspire other instructors as well to not just teach the moves but incorporate the culture with it as well. So thanks, Sarah, for coming to this and supporting this. Okay, so we are going to have our next webinar on Monday, June 24th. So make sure you sign up. If you already signed up, then you're good. Tell some other people so we can make this a group community type of vibe. And thank you again, everybody, for coming through.